to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today I'm going to show you guys how to make an albino raccoon. Now I've done plenty of white styled creatures before, but I've never gone completely albino, and I thought it'd be something really fun to try, especially working with those pinkish kind of eyes that albinos tend to have. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, so I'm going to start by doing the sewing first, so I'm going to show you guys the pattern for this piece really quick. Now this pattern can be probably used to make multiple things. I know right now I'm using it to make a raccoon, but you could probably make like a rabbit or any small mammal with it. So right here is the main body piece. You'll use it to make the sides of the creature, and then you will cut the legs off of this pattern and you'll use that to make the inside part of the legs, and then this piece here in the middle will be the piece for the belly. Now for the tail of the raccoon, because I wanted to have the stripes going down it like a normal raccoon, you're going to want to draw out the shape of the tail and then you're going to cut that into sections. You're going to want to number these sections, that way you can keep track of where they go, and then you're going to sew them all together. After you sew all the stripes together, you can sew the two halves together and then you can stuff it, and you can see how it creates a nice striping effect. Now for sewing the body, you're going to take your two side pieces and you're going to start by sewing the legs. So the inside parts of the legs you're going to lay down and you're going to sew down the very front. You're only going to sew up the front of the legs, so you're going to leave the back of the legs open. That way when we add this to the wire frame, it's a lot easier to work with. We'll sew it after it's on the wire frame. Once you have the pieces for the legs sewn together, you're going to take the belly piece and you're going to sew each half of the body onto this belly piece. So it's going to look something like this. And that's all the sewing that we can do right now. The rest of it has to wait for when we put everything together. So we're going to start on the clay pieces now. Okay, so I'm going to start on the clay face for our raccoon, and like most of the clay faces for my smaller pieces, I'm going to use a foam ball for the base of it. Now because the foam ball can't go in the oven, you need to cover it in tin foil. That way once you're done sculpting the face, you can pop it off of the foam ball and then we can put that in the oven. Foam can't go in the oven because it will melt, burn, catch fire, probably release toxic fumes, and a whole lot of other bad stuff. So make sure if you're using a foam base to build your clay piece on, you need to take that foam piece out before you put it in the oven. So once I have my foil covering my ball, I'm going to start covering that in clay. So I'm going to create a nice thick layer to work with. Now I am going to build up a little bit of clay on each side of the face. This way when we add the fur to it, it'll make that fur stick out a little bit and it'll give it more of that kind of like triangle type shape that a raccoon's face has. I'm then going to take a large lump of clay and I'm going to start building up the snout for a raccoon, and I'm going to start blending this in and shaping it into a rough idea of what I want to work with. Now I'm really not sure why I decided to work on the mouth of the raccoon first. Normally I like putting the eyes in, but I guess that's just what I did. So what I did to make the mouth was I took two large balls of clay and I smushed them onto the front of our snout. I'm then going to take my fingers and a couple tools of mine and start blending the clay together. Once I have the blending and shaping done, I'm going to use my tools to help refine the shape of where the lips are. Now this face is going to be covered in fur, so I don't need to add a ton of detail or anything. I just need to lay out the basic shape of where the mouth is going to be. After that, I moved on to making the eyes of our raccoon. So I took two balls of clay and I placed them onto the face where I wanted the eyes to go. I then used strips of clay to make the eyelids and I started blending that into the face. Lastly, I need to give our raccoon a nose, so I put a little ball of clay at the very end of his snout, I blended that in, and then I used my tools to kind of shape the nostrils. Now sometimes when you're making noses for your creature, you can just push your tools in to make the nostrils, but other times you just have too much clay there, so it helps to use a tool to kind of scoop the extra clay out and then refine the shape. So depending on how much clay you added to the face to make the nose, you might have to take away clay to get the right shape. Now this is basically all the detail I need to add to our face. Again, because we're adding fur to it, we don't have to do all the different fur details on the face, we just have to focus around the clay pieces that are not going to get covered by the fur. So right now my raccoon looks more like a badger or a small dog than an actual raccoon, but once we have the fur on the face and we add all the coloring and stuff, it'll look a lot better. So we're going to put this in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit and bake it for probably about 45 minutes. And while that's baking, I'm going to start working on the feet for our raccoon. Now for the raccoon's feet, I wanted to try something a little bit different, that way I could get the little tiny fingers looking just right. So I'm going to be taking a lump of clay and I'm going to put it at the end of a popsicle stick. This is just a base to work with. I thought this would be a lot easier than putting it on a wire. So I'm going to take my lump of clay and I'm going to put it on the tip of my popsicle stick, and then to make the fingers, I have some cut pieces of wire. I'm going to push that into the clay and position them how I want the hands to be shaped. Once I like the positioning of all my fingers, I'm going to take a little piece of clay and I'm going to put it at the tip of each wire to make a claw. I'm going to shape it roughly, and then we're going to bake this in the oven probably for about 35 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. I want this part to be baked before I add any more details because it'll be a lot easier if our little wire pieces don't move around while I'm adding clay to them. After a raccoon's hands and feet are out of the oven and have cooled to touch, we can start adding the padding to the bottom of the feet. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding the detail to the palm of the hand. So basically I'm going to take little balls of clay and I'm going to add them to the wire, and I'm going to start blending them in to make the different paddings. Now I'm not going to add clay to the back of the hands because I want to try something different out. So I'm going to bake this in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 30-35 minutes. Okay, our hands and feet have finished baking for the second time and have cooled, and we can start working on the back of them. So what I had in mind was I wanted to make the back of the hands look furry, so I'm actually going to be using felt for this. So I took our little hand, I laid it out on some paper, and I used a pen to trace around it. I refined the shape, and then I used this as a pattern to cut some felt out. Once I had my felt cut out, I'm going to use my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue it to the back of the hand. Now the reason I'm using a peach color felt instead of a white color felt is because I'm going to be painting our hands and feet a nice skin color first, and then I'm going to add the color of the fur afterwards on top of this. So that way you can kind of see a little bit of the peach color pop through, and it kind of has a bit of a better blend. Okay, now we're going to start on the painting. So I'm going to start on the face first. Now this is really easy because you just need to paint the nose and the two eyes. So I'm just going to primer everything with a nice pink color. I'm going to let that dry, and then we can start adding details and shading. Now the trick to painting an albino eye is basically you're just going to be using different hues of pink. So for the pupil, we're going to use a darker pink, and then we're going to start adding highlights to it, and they're all going to be different shades of pink or red. Then we just need to add a little bit of white highlight to the eye to make it look reflective. Now for the feet, I'm going to primer them a color very similar to the color of the felt, so I'm going to just paint over the whole thing, even the felt a little bit. After all of that's dried and our hands are a nice solid color, we can start painting the backs of the hands where the felt is. So I'm going to add a little bit of white to it, and I'm just going to start blending that in. Lastly, I'm going to paint the claws a nice gray color. After all of my paint is dried, I'm going to apply a thin layer of resin over everything to help protect the paint. Now this will have to dry overnight, and once that's done, we can start putting everything together. Okay guys, one more thing I need to make real quick before we put everything together is a wire frame to put everything on. That way we can make our raccoon poseable. So for making this, I need 3 pieces of wire. One of the wires is going to be the full length of the body. So you're going to measure where the head is, you're going to go all the way down the body and the tail. For the other 2 wires, you're going to measure the front legs, the distance between the front legs and the back legs, and the length of the back legs. So you're going to bend those all into shape, and then you're going to use a thinner wire to put them all together. Okay guys, all of our clay pieces are finally dry and we can start putting everything together. So I have all my pieces laid out and we're going to start by flipping the fabric for the body right side out. We're then going to take the wire frame and we're going to run the wires for the legs through the legs of the fabric. We're then going to take the hands and the feet and we're going to glue these to the ends of all the wires for the legs. Now I'm going to use my hot glue gun and I'm going to take the fabric for the arms and the fabric for the legs and we're going to glue them to the hands and feet. Now I'm just using the hot glue to help hold the fabric into place, but the real glue that I'm using that'll actually help this stay together is going to be E6000. So once I have all my fabric put into place, I'm going to use the E6000 and go around all the seams. Now I had a little bit of a problem where the fabric for the arms and legs didn't go all the way around the hands and the feet. So what I did to fix this was I took a little strip of fabric. I decided to go with the blonde fabric to add just a little bit more color to the piece, and then I just glued that to the back of the feet and the hands. I'm then going to sew all of these closed and stuff them. After I have all the legs finished, I'm going to add the tail to the piece. So I'm going to run the wire for the tail inside of the tail and then I'm going to sew the tail onto the body. And now we can finally add the head to the piece. So I'm going to take our clay head and I'm going to glue it to our foam ball and then we're going to glue that to the wire frame. After the head is connected to the wire frame, we're going to take the fabric for the neck and we're going to glue it all the way around that foam ball. Now that we have the fabric for the neck glued all the way around the base of the head, we can now stuff the rest of the body and close it up. Now the last thing we need to do is finish the face of the raccoon, and we can't finish our face without making a pair of ears real quick. So to make our ears, I have some fur fabric and some felt, and they're each cut out into a basic triangle shape. I'm then going to sew these together and flip them right side out. We're then going to glue these into place and then we can start working on the face of the raccoon. So to cover the face of the raccoon, we're going to be using a little bit of hot glue to help hold things into place, but we're mainly using the E6000 glue. So I'm going to be cutting strips of fur to fit onto the face and we're just going to be gluing them into place. Once you have the face completely covered in fur, you're just going to let this dry and then the last thing you need to do is just trim it up a little bit. Okay guys, and that's how I did an albino raccoon. I had so much fun with it. I'm going to have him along with a bunch of other creatures in my Etsy shop, so make sure to check the links down below if you want to buy anything. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!